Have you ever wondered how warm water in the Pacific Ocean can change the weather thousands of kilometers away? It sounds surprising, but changes in this enormous ocean can influence rain, droughts, storms, temperatures, and even food production in different parts of the world. The ocean and the atmosphere are always connected. And one of the best examples of this relationship has a name you probably know: El Niño. But before we talk about floods, droughts, and extreme weather, we need to travel back in time. Imagine the coast of Peru, hundreds of years ago. Imagine the coast of Peru, hundreds of years ago. Fishermen go out to sea, just as they have done for generations. Normally, the water near the coast is cool and rich in nutrients. These nutrients support large populations of fish, making fishing very important for the people who live there. But sometimes, something changes. Around Christmas, fishermen notice that the ocean is warmer than usual. And when the water becomes warmer, there are fewer fish in their normal fishing areas. This unusual warm water is connected to the origin of the name, El Niño. The name is Spanish. It means the little boy, and it was connected with the Christ child because fishermen often notice these warmer conditions around Christmas. But many years later, scientists discovered something surprising. This was not simply a local event near Peru. Scientists discovered that something much bigger was happening across the tropical Pacific Ocean. To understand it, we first need to see what happens during a normal year. Normally, strong winds called trade winds blow from east to west across the tropical Pacific. Think of these winds like a giant hand, slowly pushing warm surface water toward Asia and Australia. Near the coast of South America, something very different happens. Cold water from deeper in the ocean rises toward the surface. Scientists call this process upwelling. The idea is actually very simple. Deep, cold water moves upward. And this water is extremely important because it contains nutrients. These nutrients help small ocean organisms grow, and those organisms become food for fish. This is one reason why the waters near Peru can support so much marine life. But during El Niño, this normal system begins to change. The trade winds become weaker. When this happens, the warm water that is normally pushed toward Asia and Australia begins to spread back across the central and eastern Pacific. As a result, the ocean near South America becomes warmer than usual. At the same time, the normal upwelling of cold, nutrient-rich water becomes weaker. And this can create problems for marine life. With fewer nutrients reaching the surface, there may be less food available for many ocean organisms. Fish can move to different areas, and fishing communities may notice important changes. But the effects of El Niño do not stay in the ocean. This is where the story becomes much bigger. Because when such a large area of the Pacific becomes warmer, the atmosphere above it begins to change too. The ocean and the atmosphere are always working together. When a huge area of the Pacific becomes warmer than usual, more heat and moisture can enter the atmosphere. This can change where clouds form and where rain falls. Winds can also change, and those changes can influence weather thousands of kilometers away. This is why El Niño can have effects far beyond the Pacific Ocean. But there is something very important to understand. El Niño is not a storm. It is not a hurricane, and it doesn't mean that every place on Earth will experience extreme weather. El Niño is a large climate pattern. It involves unusually warm water in parts of the central and eastern tropical Pacific, together with important changes in the atmosphere. And El Niño is actually only one part of a much larger natural climate cycle. Scientists call this larger cycle ENSO. That means El Niño Southern Oscillation. El Niño is one phase of this cycle, but there is also another important phase. La Niña. During El Niño, parts of the tropical Pacific become warmer than usual. During La Niña, the opposite happens. The water in these areas becomes colder than usual, and the winds and rainfall patterns can change again. And sometimes, neither El Niño nor La Niña is present. Scientists call this ENSO-neutral. These conditions do not follow a simple calendar. El Niño and La Niña usually appear every few years. An individual event often lasts around 9 to 12 months, although some can continue for longer. And when these changes happen in the Pacific, their effects can travel surprisingly far around the planet. So, why does El Niño receive so much attention? Because changing the temperature of such a large part of the Pacific can influence weather patterns around the world. During El Niño, some regions can receive much more rain than usual. Other regions can become unusually dry. For example, parts of Peru can experience heavy rainfall and flooding. Australia and Indonesia can experience hotter and drier conditions, increasing the risk of drought and wildfires. El Niño can also influence weather in North America, Africa, and other regions. But there is something important to remember. These are typical patterns, not guarantees. El Niño does not affect every country in exactly the same way. Every event is different. And throughout history, some El Niño events have been much stronger and much more destructive than others. One of the most important El Niño events happened in 1982 and 1983. At first, scientists did not fully understand how strong it was becoming. The event caused major changes in weather around the Pacific and other parts of the world. Heavy rain and flooding affected parts of South America, while drought created serious problems in places such as Australia and Indonesia. It also affected fishing near the coast of Peru. Then, another very powerful El Niño arrived in 1997 and 1998. By this time, scientists had better satellites, ocean instruments, and computer models. They could watch the Pacific changing in much greater detail. This event became one of the strongest El Niños ever recorded, and its effects were felt across many countries. But it would not be the last powerful El Niño the modern world would experience. Another powerful El Niño developed in 2015 and 2016. Once again, ocean temperatures in the tropical Pacific became unusually warm. Scientists compared this event with the major El Niño of 1997 and 1998. Its influence was seen in weather patterns around the world. Some regions experienced heavy rain and flooding. Others suffered from serious drought. El Niño also helped raise global temperatures because the warm Pacific released a large amount of heat into the atmosphere. But several years later, an even more important climate story began. In 2023, scientists confirmed that El Niño had returned. The event became strong and continued into 2024. At the same time, the planet was already becoming warmer because of human-caused climate change. Together, these factors helped create an extraordinary period of global heat. And this is where the story begins to connect directly with the climate conditions we experienced in 2025 and 2026. The El Niño of 2023 and 2024 officially ended in 2024. But that did not mean global temperatures suddenly returned to normal. The oceans had stored enormous amounts of heat, and human-caused climate change continued to warm the planet. Then, conditions in the tropical Pacific began to change. By early 2025, a weak La Niña had developed. Remember, La Niña is the colder phase of the ENSO cycle. But this La Niña was unusual because it was weak and short. By March 2025, the tropical Pacific was already returning toward neutral conditions. This showed scientists something very important. El Niño and La Niña can influence global temperatures from year to year.
but they are now happening on a planet that is already much warmer than it was in the past. And that helps explain why 2025 remained extremely warm, even without a strong El Niño.
And 2025 became another remarkable year for global temperatures. Even without a strong El Niño, the planet remained extremely warm. This is important because El Niño is only one factor that affects global temperature. The long-term warming caused by greenhouse gases continues in the background. At the same time, different regions experienced very different weather. Some places faced dangerous heat waves. Others experienced heavy rainfall, floods, drought, or unusual changes in seasonal weather. But scientists are careful with these connections. We cannot say that El Niño directly causes every flood, drought, or heat wave. Weather is influenced by many factors. Instead, El Niño and La Niña can change the chances of certain weather patterns happening. And during 2025, scientists continued watching the Pacific closely because another change in this natural cycle was already beginning to develop. And in 2026, the Pacific changed again. At the beginning of the year, La Niña was still present. Then, during the following months, the colder conditions weakened, and the Pacific briefly returned to neutral conditions. But the story did not stop there. By May 2026, El Niño conditions had developed again. The Pacific began warming quickly. By July, NOAA reported that El Niño was becoming stronger, and scientists expected it to continue strengthening through the rest of 2026. And the forecast became especially interesting. NOAA estimated a very high chance that this El Niño could become very strong before the end of the year. So in only a short period, the Pacific moved from La Niña to neutral conditions and then back to El Niño. And once again, scientists began asking the same question. What could this mean for weather around the world?
A stronger El Niño can change the chances of certain weather patterns in many regions. In parts of South America, including areas near Peru and Ecuador, El Niño can increase the possibility of heavier rainfall. In Australia and Indonesia, it can favor hotter and drier conditions. And in the United States, El Niño often changes the winter weather pattern. The southern part of the country can become wetter, while some northern areas may experience warmer conditions. El Niño can also affect tropical storms. In the Atlantic Ocean, stronger winds high in the atmosphere can make it more difficult for hurricanes to develop. But remember, these are tendencies. They do not tell us exactly what will happen in every city or every country. That is why scientists continue watching ocean temperatures, winds, clouds, and rainfall. The Pacific gives us important signals, but it does not give us a perfect prediction of the future.
This is why El Niño is so important to understand. It is not simply warm water near South America. It is part of a huge system connecting the ocean and the atmosphere. A change in the Pacific can influence rainfall, temperatures, agriculture, fishing, and storms thousands of kilometers away. But today, there is another important factor: climate change. El Niño is a natural cycle. It existed long before modern global warming. Climate change does not create El Niño, but El Niño now happens in a warmer world. This means natural climate changes can occur while global temperatures are already unusually high. Scientists are still studying exactly how climate change may affect future El Niño events. But one lesson is already clear. To understand extreme weather today, we need to understand both natural climate patterns and the long-term warming of our planet. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of this story. El Niño shows us how connected our planet really is. Warm water in one part of the Pacific can influence weather thousands of kilometers away. Scientists now use satellites, ocean buoys, ships, and computer models to watch these changes and improve their forecasts.
This information can help farmers prepare for drought, communities prepare for floods, and governments make better decisions. We cannot stop El Niño. It is a natural part of Earth's climate, but we can understand it better. And the better we understand our planet, the better we can prepare for what comes next. From the fishermen of Peru hundreds of years ago to modern satellites watching the Pacific today, El Niño has become much more than a strange period of warm water. It is a powerful reminder that Earth's oceans, atmosphere, weather, and climate are all connected.